Hello. So, just getting started on the lesson series for the early Roman Republic. Thank you. I think we'll just wait for a few minutes for people to join the room, just to make sure that we've got good numbers. Cool. I think we'll wait another minute or two to see if anyone else pops in. I am fine, thank you. How are you? Excellent. Yeah, I'm hoping the game doesn't crash. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, considering it's a really good resource, and there's lots and lots and lots of really cool stuff that I can show you that links into stuff that we're going to be doing in the lesson. So, those of you who don't know, this is a free series. Basically, I thought it'd be good to come on and do like a showcase of how I am teaching. So, you know, obviously there will be more in-depth studies going forward. There is a list of sources that you can read along to as we're going. I'll be pointing them out as we go, when it'll be a good time to go away and read those. But yeah, obviously we won't be going into things like secondary literature or modern sources, things like that, because that's not what this is all about. This is a very rough overview and a fun jaunt through Roman history, essentially. We won't be going into extraneous detail. That won't be happening at all. Generally, we're just going to have some fun with it. We're just going to talk about Roman history, put to bed some rumours that you may have heard. I can tell you the arguments that are out there about certain things, but generally, I'm going to go from the start of the Roman Republic all the way through to the end, hopefully, and that's the plan anyway. It'll be separated into several episodes of an hour long each, roundabout, and the first one will be on the early Republic, and the systems of the early Republic, and also the relations between the early Republic and the states around them. We'll be moving on to things like Caesar and things like the Roman expansion and wars, things like that. But yeah, we'll be using the actual game as a barometer of that progress. So wherever we go in the game, that's going to be essentially what we're talking about that week, which will be really cool. So I think we've filled up now. So yeah, here's the first episode, which is the life in the early Republic. So let's give this a go. So I'm going to start it now. So here's Rome, as you can see on the game. It's a very nice bit of trivia on the game itself. When it was first released back in 2012, it was an absolute disaster of a game. Or 2013, sorry, it was a disaster. But since then, it's been patched, it's been stabilised. It's a lot better than it is now. I have a lot of mods running as well. We should keep things nice and nice and authentic, or as authentic as I can make it anyway. But you can see under the factions tab here, so we've got our main faction, which is Rome. Under the factions tab, we can play as 3 Roman families, or 3 Roman dynasties. We have the Julia, who are essentially the family of Julius Caesar, or the family that Julius Caesar will come to belong to. Now, I don't think it's quite right that they have a place in the game this early, because this is 272 BC. So this is ages before Julius Caesar is ever a thing, and his family were not rich patricians. They were not well off. They were the upper class, but they were like the lowest modicum of the upper class. They weren't known. They weren't thought of as important. They certainly were not in the same. Sorry, one second. They certainly were not in the same remit as people like the Scipios or the Cornelii. It was nothing like that. They were literally no marks at this point. So we have the House of Junior as well. Junior is essentially where Lucius Junius Brutus comes from, and where Marcus Brutus will come from later on in Roman history as well. But the Junii were always very well respected. They were always very a large family in Rome at this time. So I agree with them being there. And of course you have the Cornelii as well, which are Sulla's family, so the family that Sulla comes from. And although the importance of families in this game, you obviously have to think about what sources that we have for those Roman families going back in history. We do not have a lot. A lot of this is guesswork by the developers, which is fine. But for me, you know, as soon as, you know, I honestly think that in terms of families, they are, how do I put it? How do I put this? People tend to look at Roman history and they like to categorize things, okay? So, in the Roman Senate, for example, we like to think of, when we think of Julius Caesar, we think of his populares movement, okay? His movement of senators and who are behind him for the good of the people, blah, blah, blah. And, of course, we have the optimates, who are the best people, who are the, you know, the older upper class, who are against him. We tend to think of that almost through a lens of modern history, like Labour and Conservative, or Republican and Democrat, sorry, in America. You know, we tend to see them as two defined political parties. They're not. They were not defined political parties. These are very fluid systems that are interchanging all the time because you always need to do what's best for you. Now, the same goes with the three families here. The three families here were not as cut and dry as you see them now. There wasn't, you know, it wasn't just here is the house of Cornelia, here's the house of Junia, here's the house of Julia. No. They are separate families, but all being interwoven, they're all intermarrying, they're all adopting each other, things like that all the time. So they're not a static not a static thing. They're very, very, very fluid, as their own politics was wont to be. So, in terms of who we're choosing, I think we're going to choose the Cornelii, simply because they've got pretty good stuff down here. Obviously, we'll be going into more of a gamey part of the lesson every now and again. Could go with them as well. Yeah, we're going with the Cornelii. Why not? I haven't gone quiet, I'm just waiting for the game to load.
You are at war with the Etruscan League. March north and capture their territories. This will allow you to consolidate Italia and ensure the safety of Roma. You must wage war if you hope to extend your dominion. Syracuse and Carthage own territory in Magna Graecia, so conflict with them is inevitable if you wish to expand across the Mediterranean. Otherwise, they may prove useful allies against Etruria or the Gaulish tribes to the north. Come what may, Rome will triumph.
Cool. So again, yeah, we are, in the end of the day, playing a game, so I will be going into different things about the game as we move on. But mainly, of course, going to be a history lesson. So, welcome to Rome 2. This is nowadays, it's a wonderful game. It's absolutely wonderful, and to be able to play it is an absolute pleasure. Looking through it, I think the first thing we're going to be doing is pushing up north. And that's because what the game likes to try and do is simulate early Roman expansion from the Republic. So, you know, this is Republic before the wars with Carthage. So obviously Carthage owns much of the Mediterranean, and all Rome really holds is the lower part of Italy. So the Latin Wars have been going on for quite a while at this stage. So the early Republic, in terms of Rome itself, the Roman Republic has been expanding and conquering its neighbours steadily for a little while now. But the one thing that was not right about what the game said was the Etruscan League. The Etruscan League isn't a thing. Realistically, it's actually called the Latin League. The Latin League is what it's called. And this is basically a loose conglomeration of Latin city-states that are opposed to Rome. And they are actually in bed with some Gauls as well, which is very, very strange, considering how things go later on in history. But the first thing we're going to do is to have a little look at our family tree here. And yeah, so these are the Scipii, which is what we're controlling at the moment. There is a character who we will be trying to adopt a little bit later on. Oh, he's pretty cool. He's pretty cool, he is pretty cool. So we were going to try and recruit Decimus Gabinius Corvus to our side, but yeah, I might just do this guy. So we recruited an army there.
At your command, at once.
We'll give him some troops.
On the move.
Obviously, we'll be going. My speciality is military history, so we will be going into that as well. Needless to say. So where's Legio 1 then? I've got Legio 2 there. Where's the first Legion? Legio 2, Legio 3. Where's the... Oh, here it is. Okay, so we're going to rename that. So I'm a stickler for details. So it can be the Legio 3 Italica, why not? I'm going to pop him over here just to save a bit of public order, because cities are a lot happier when they've got troops in them to keep them safe. Which is fair enough.
Ready for orders.
Now, we'll rename this to Legio 1. Call it Primogenia, which actually means firstborn, basically. There we go. And these can be Legio 3. Lovely stuff. Send our spy further north.
As you command.
Excellent stuff.
At your command.
And we just want to see this guy on our family tree for the next part of the lesson. So, I was going to adopt somebody to teach you about adoption and stuff, but I'll still go into that a bit later on. But the first thing we're actually going to do is actually push north to take care of the Latin League and to take care of the Gauls as well, who are pushing down out of the Alps. Now, the reason for this is in 390 BC, the Battle of Allia was fought in northern Italy by Gauls who generally, after there was quite a large dispute between the city of Rome and the Gauls, who were the northern European tribes, about trade rights and about tribute and things like that. Long story short, it culminated in the Battle of Allia, which the Romans lost in 390 BC. And as such, the leader of the Gauls, Brennus, very famous name amongst Gaulish tribes at the time, sacked Rome. So, a lot of people say that, the actual famous sacking of Rome is much later. Well, Actually, no. The first sacking of Rome was in 390 BC. So well before the glory days of Rome have come. In the Battle of Allia is fought, the Romans lose, and Brennus enters Rome, and essentially, puts the entire city to the torch. And we actually have, if you look in your leaflet that you actually have right now, Livy, for instance, shows us when after the battle had been fought and the reformations are being made, the Gauls and the Romans are deciding how much tribute Rome should pay to the Gauls, to which Brennus responds when the tallies have already been weighed up on the weighing scale. He places his sword on the weighing scale to weigh it down a bit more, to show Rome how much they're owed. And when the Roman senator looks up quizzically at him, and in outrage, Brennus just shrugs and says, "Well, woe to the vanquished." And I think that's what we're going to call the actual first lesson in our series is "Woe to the vanquished," because those are words that I think ring out across Roman history, and they're said by a Gaul, but those are actually words that Romans will say to other states throughout history from this point on. The great Seleucid Empire that was formed out of Alexander's empire was humiliated by Rome several times in the battlefield, and there was one instance where a king of the Seleucid Empire is standing dictating terms to Rome, and the Roman senator, who's just a normal general, he takes a stick and draws a line, a circular line around the king, and says, "You're not to step outside of this circle until you've agreed to these terms." It's just, this is what Rome will do. But essentially, Rome is the greatest learner in human history in terms of a state. In that you can see that dichotomy of that relationship between the original "woe to the vanquished" statement and how the Romans act as certain powers later on in history. They're taught bloody lessons by the Carthaginians and by the Gauls and by the Greeks on how to act and how to rule. And the ancient world does not fall into the lap of the Romans by accident. Okay, that's something that we'll get into a bit later on. But at the Battle of Allia in 390 BC, the Gauls win. They sack Rome, and that instills in Rome a very deep-seated fear of the northern regions of Gaul, and that's actually a fear that Julius Caesar will prey upon much later on in his career, which we will be covering later on as well. In a future session, but that fear is something that is also preyed upon by him, and it is again deep-seated, and it's not the only peoples who the Romans feel that way about. The phrase "Hannibal at the gate" will be very famous, and some of you would have heard of that. And that is literally Hannibal instilled such a spectre across the Roman world by almost defeating them, that the phrase "Hannibal is at the gate" was said to Roman children to scare them to bed. This is a culture who demonize those outside when they need to. And then certainly the sack of Rome was an extremely traumatic event. Livy, Plutarch, and Diodorus Siculus all tell us about the sacking of Rome, the horrors that went on, if you look at your resource sheet that you've been given. And also, in terms of the actual spectre of the Gaul at this stage, the Romans were blindly afraid of the Gauls at this stage in Roman history. They were a threat. They were a constant threat, always coming down into Italy to raid and pillage. But we will also be getting away from the stereotype typical Gaul as being a barbarian. These are very advanced people. These are people with a lot of skills in agriculture, a lot of skills with irrigation, a lot of skills with metalworking and things like that. They had a very advanced culture. But again, we'll be getting into that when we get to Julius Caesar a bit later on. But yeah, here we are. At this stage in Roman history, the fear is definitely still there. The fear is actually palpable towards Gaul. But I think we need to get away from making definite statements, okay? And that's something that I fall into quite a lot, and that I will do during the series. But definite statements about history are something to be avoided, which is why when I see modern scholars providing definite statements about things that happened, it really does irk me, because we don't know, and that's just how it is. We have our sources that I'm going to be using, and you're going to be using during this session. For instance, the rebuilding of the Roman walls is a very famous, amongst historians anyway, event that happened directly after the Battle of Allia, where both Livy and Plutarch tell us of the great Roman walls that are thrown up around the city, to deter people like the Gauls from coming in ever again and sacking Rome. And this first sacking is something that lives in the Roman psyche for so long, that it really is that spectre of defeat that hangs over the Roman Empire for ages to come, absolutely ages to come. But let's get into the game for a little while, because I think I've talked enough. So let's look at our family here. Papria Junior Scarus. Right, so he's 16 years of age. That's pretty cool. He's pretty young. So this is going to be our character for our campaign. Is Marcus Clulius Scaurus, sorry. Essentially, what I'm going to do is I'm going to recreate the career of somebody like Julius Caesar. This man's essentially going to conquer the world, and we're going to follow him as he does it. Don't get me wrong; there will be some lessons that we do, which will be very light on the history front, and very intense during gameplay. And there'll be some lessons that we do which are the other way around, which are like this one, where it was going to be very, very intense in history and little bit less in gameplay. So, yeah, Scaurus is going to be our main man. He's the head of the Legio 1 Primigenia. Now, at this stage in Roman history, the legions are a citizen force. They're not professional soldiers at this time. They are drawn up from people who have land in Rome, and the provinces as well. When I say provinces, I mean like other parts of Italy are drawn in. The Hastati, which you see here, these are the youngest and poorest people. They are at the front of the fighting line most of the time, the lighter armour. The line behind that are the men in the prime of their life. These are the Principes, and these are essentially men from the age of 30 to 45. The Roman state is the prime of life, and they are in heavier armour. They have a bit more money to them. They have a bit more land, and behind them are the veterans, the Triarii, which are spearmen. And these are the men who are 45 and above, grizzled old veterans who have quite a bit of money to them. They have been afforded quite a bit of land and slaves because of the fighting that they've been doing. And the actual cavalry of the Romans at this stage is called the Equites, or the Equites, as some people call them. I call them Equites. And they're called Equites, which literally means knights. And they're called knights because these are the richest citizens in Rome who form the cavalry. They can afford horses, they can afford to groom them and keep them. They can afford to equip themselves in the best armour. And so generally they are, warriors on horseback. Now, this force could not be in the field year-round. It would be called up upon in times of great crisis, but it wasn't like later Roman legions where they were a constant force that was out there holding down borders. This is a force that's called up at times of great panic, or at times where they're actually needed to go out and fight enemies of Rome. And in our scenario, this Legio 1 Primigenia is one that is now going to go out and fight the Latin League. But what I do have to stress is, this game will show this legion being around all of the time. That was not the case back in 272 BC. This would be a seasonal force. This would be a force that was called up every now and again to go and fight. And you would not have the same commander either. This is something that happens much later in the Roman Empire when you have single commanders leading legions. This happens a lot later. Nowadays, you have to lobby for that kind of thing, and you have to have a lot of people backing you in the Roman Senate to be able to be given a military command and go out and command legions, because you can earn a lot of money doing that by sacking other people's cities. So there we go. And of course, your second source there is Plutarch and Livy, who are both talking about the Roman legions and how they were sequestered at this time in history. So we're going to have a few more Hastati. Another thing the game does, in reality, I could just recruit Principes and Triarii right on the off, because that's just how it was. But in the game, for balancing reasons, you can't just go out and go and get Principes and Hastati, because Principes and Triarii, or you would just go and kibosh every single other faction in the game. We are going to expand Rome here and just give it a bit more stuff, and we'll give it a public forum, why not? Consentia, we will expand you, and we'll give you some land to farm.
At your command.
I think I'm gonna Velites. Now Velites were the
March.
Were the original younger, poorer people of Rome. So these are people who have very, very, very little armour on, and they're basically a skirmishing force that wear dogs' heads going into battle. So they can be picked out by centurions for either hanging back in cowardice or doing very well, where they can be promoted to be Hastati. And again, this series is mainly, it's not an academic series. You can feel free to let it amend or inform your studies if you wish. That's fine. But it's not meant to be a full-on academic series. We're just having a bit of fun. So
We hunger for
we
battle.
will now take Primogenia and go up to
We take
Velathi.
this settlement for Rome. Besieging the settlement.
There's no one here, so we're going to auto-resolve this. Because there's literally no one here. So we'll just... Yeah, there's no chance of us losing it, so...
Ready for battle.
Alright, he is leveled up. That's
Commander.
nice. Okay, so... Enables rally and inspire. Excellent stuff. Now, the funny things about these cities is that the public order penalty to actually conquering them is basically zero. They're immediately happy that you've conquered them because they have a 100% Latin culture, which is really good. Which basically means they're already Latin. They're not. Yeah, they're not foreign. They're not really foreigners.
My skills are on the road again. No further orders.
Okay, so we're sending our ships to the Middle East because Egypt has a lot of grain, and I wouldn't mind trading for some grain right now. Which was actually a thing in Rome. There is a famous quote from Mark Antony from Diodorus Siculus where he basically says, the grain ships must keep rowing, essentially. At a time in the Roman Republic where Rome was needing grain. The first dole recorded by Livy, dole payment, which is basically public welfare, was in Rome. And if you were a citizen in Rome, anyone in Rome, you would get a payment of grain. You were literally given grain. You were given food to survive, even if you had no job or anything like that. You could still survive and get food, which is remarkable considering the time,
Before Rome.
the actual times that we're living in at this stage. And that is source number 3 on your handout. Okay. Nice. Our spy leveled up.
At your service.
Which is good.
Ready for battle.
And again, there's no one here. So we'll just do this.
Ready for orders. Ready for battle.
Vanguard Legion and Formidable Fighters. That's what we do. Bit of food would be nice. Neapolis can be a harbour, why not?
How can I be of assistance?
Now let's go see what the Gauls are doing. Just in the shadow of the Alps here.
Is there nothing else? On the road again. I serve
Go.
only Rome.
So we literally just started an edict there called Bread and Games, which is just what we were talking about. People getting bread and games. So in terms of the games, in terms of gladiators and things, which is a very Roman thing that everyone seems to want to talk about all the time, I do have some theories on that. That I will go into, but the one thing I will tell you is how they came about. Now, you know, gladiatorial games came about through funerary rites and funerals, things like that, and essentially two people would fight for the honor of the person who is deceased. Now, whether or not that would end in death, scholars are split, quite frankly. I think it did sometimes, but usually the two people fighting would be slaves if that was the case. And of course, you know, funerary games became very, very, very popular. And Tacitus, which is the fourth source in your handout, tells us at one stage, you know, people are finding more and more excuses to hold funerary games because they're quite popular. So instead of, you know, my wife has died, it is, oh, my second wife died 10 years ago today. I need to hold games for that because I want to run for political office as a grain monitor, and this will make me popular. You know, so there is a definite transition from the games being a celebratory thing for the person who has died, very respectful thing, to actually being exploited in a way, and people doing it more and more and more often to accrue political favour. And by the time Julius Caesar comes around, he nearly bankrupts himself by putting on games and events to make sure that people are placated and to make sure that people are well on his side. Caesar was incredibly popular with the lower classes in Rome for the sheer amount of free games that he would put on and the spectacular amount that he would lavish on these games, none of which was his own money. All of this was borrowed money, of course, which is why eventually he had to take a command in Gaul and to become Pontifex Maximus, which is essentially leader of the Roman state religion, or he would face slavery because he was in debt that much to people. Let's have a look at this.
We hunger for battle.
Cool. So I'm gonna let them chill for a bit.
Service. Swift and silent, a shadow among shadows.
not much is going on right now, which is okay.
At ease, men.
Cool. So again, yeah, we're going to... Our ships are going over here to try and discover Egypt so we can start trading with them. Maybe. We'll see. Egypt in this game tend to be very, very, very finicky. They don't really want to trade with anyone. They're pretty much arseholes like that. But of course, at this stage, we will be going into Ptolemaic Egypt and things. So we're going to be covering different cultures as we go along. Mainly it's going to be about Rome, obviously, because we're doing this from the perspective of Rome. But we will be doing, when we encounter people like the Seleucids, and people like the Ptolemaic Egyptians, like we just have done now, when we actually get to being, our legions come over here and start interacting with them. By interacting, I mean cutting throats and throwing people in the sea. That's when we're going to be talking about things like that. So of course you see the lighthouse there, which is the very famous lighthouse of Alexandria. Shipping port. Oh wow, the Ligurians are taking on the Insurbes. Or Insubrae. Wow. Okay. That is a siege that's going on up there.
The waves still beckon. Commander, ready for orders. Honor to serve.
So, when mentioning the fear of the Gauls towards... Oh, there's a big army coming across here. Ah. Okay.
Ready for orders.
Let's just come back ashore for now.
The ship.
So I think that big army is going to land here. So in terms of fear of Gaul, you know, it drove the Romans to extremes. And put it this way, the fear of Gaul, we have a modern source called Cornell, who's your next source, who describes from several different accounts, including Diodorus Siculus, Tacitus and Plutarch, that human sacrifices were actually made in Rome to appease the gods and to stop the Gauls from actually doing anything like that again, like the sack of Rome in 390. 2 Gauls and 2 Greeks were actually buried alive for this. The Romans were not people who did human sacrifice at all. So for them to do things like this does show an incredible amount of apprehension and fear over another culture. Fear that we're going to address in this episode when we take the Pramiginia Legion and we try and take all of this land just in front of the Alps. But for now, we're actually going to try and take on the Latin League, because they're going to be serious problems here. Libo? Where's Libo? Is he there? There he is. Okay. Let's see what the Latin League does. And what they're going to do. Are they going to get out of their ships?
Ready for orders.
I guess not.
Advance. Is that all? We hunger for battle. Are you ready to serve Rome?
So we're kind of going to have to take on that city of Alia. The fact that they... Alalia, sorry. The fact that they have that is a real pain because it's across the water. But they are going to keep making armies like this and sending them against us whilst we're trying to take on Rome, which we don't want to do. Sorry, Gaul, which we don't want to do. Okay, they actually have plague.
Commander.
This army has plagues. Let's move them out of the city.
Waiting for orders.
Or I'll actually entrench you as well.
You may as well get comfy, men.
Okay.
Commander. For death and honor!
Oh, there's a lot of people there.
Retreat! Retreat!
Nah.
Yes. Row! Row! Row!
We'll get back on land.
Going ashore. At your command.
Tell you what we can do.
Soldiering. It's a good life.
Take these four. We'll send the 3rd Legion over to take Alalia, whilst this Legion pens down this army here. Because once their last settlement is gone, they stop getting reinforcements. They start losing numbers, which would be really good. But the longer we leave the Gauls north of us, the larger their armies are going to be when we try and take it over. Which will suck.
At your command. Commander. We must rest a while. For honor and glory.
Okay. Nice, so in 12 turns we're going to be able to recruit much better Republic troops, which is great. Okay.
We hunger for battle. On course.
They are now retreating
The
to...
sea beckons. Beat the drums! The waves still beckon. Your orders? Moving out!
Okay. So the Latin League are now retreating to Alalia, hopefully to make a last stand, we'll see. Let's look at diplomacy. Now, there are 3 thoughts on Roman expansion, all of which are secondary sources, so modern sources that I can throw into our next bunch of literature if you want. But the 3 thoughts are mainly these: that the Romans expanded on purpose and were imperialistic and wanted to take over different territories around the world. That's number 1. Number 2, that they were accidental expansionists, so that they would get involved in foreign affairs to try and keep the peace and to try and step in and try and be the mediator. The modern, a lot of people like to say that this is what happened in Greece, which is kind of right, but also not. And the third mode of thought is that they were defensive imperialists, defensive expansionists. So they would preemptively attack different states that they thought would be a problem in the future to secure their own borders. Now, a lot of modern scholars, they fall into one of these 3 camps. And this is something that I particularly don't like. I really do not like the fact that there are camps like this. Personally, I feel that the Roman outlook towards expansionism depended on the state that they were facing at the time. So in terms of Greece, yes, I would say that it is very accidental in terms of expanding into Greece. They didn't really want Greece. There was nothing there to get. There was no real resources to have in Greece in controlling it. But the fact that they destroyed Corinth, razed it to the ground to keep it pliant and to keep it peaceful, and eventually just took it for themselves, showed that intent, showed that that accidental / defensive intent that goes between the 2 lines of accidental and defensive. Rome accidentally basically took Greece because they were preemptively, defensively trying to keep peace in the region, and because the city-states just kept fighting each other, Rome went back into Greece 3 times, and left because they didn't want to take Greece, and in the end they had to keep the peace. So I agree with that, but also in terms of look what happens eventually in Gaul when Caesar goes up to Gaul and essentially divides and conquers the entire region and brings it under Roman rule. Now that wasn't a defensive expansion, that wasn't an accidental expansion, that was expansion on purpose. But I do tend to think that looking at one of these 3 subsets, expansion on purpose tends to happen at the whim of the individual, which basically means Rome expands on purpose into Gaul because Julius Caesar wants to expand on purpose into Gaul. Yeah. Rome expands into Asia Minor because it wants to. Not really, because Pompey the Great wants to expand into Asia Minor to make his fortune. Yeah? Rome expands into North Africa, most of North Africa, not because it wants to, but because Marius wants to go and expand into... So, you see it's behind these generals, these single monolithic personalities that want to go out and expand and accrue their own wealth and their own legend for their own men, but they're doing so under the name of the state. Rome is actually all of these things. It expands on purpose, it expands accidentally, and it expands through preemptive defensive strategies. It does all 3 things, depending on what forces they're facing, depending on the enemies on the border, depending on their allies, and depending on who's making that action. Flamininus in Greece, which is his actual name, Flamininus, he actually expands into Greece. He doesn't want to take Greece. He doesn't want anything to do with Greece. He just goes to Greece to keep the peace. which is something that we see. We generally don't see Caesar doing. Caesar goes into Gaul, right, and he tells everybody that will listen that he's doing it as a defensive expansion. He's doing it, he's accidentally conquering lands. He's trying to keep the peace. Really, what he's doing, and we can see it through all of his memoirs as well in his Gallic Wars, and he's boasting about killing so many people. Really, what he's doing is for his own glory, his own legend, and his own riches. That's really what he's doing. He's he's expanding on purpose, but he's masking it so as a person who is accidentally expanding and is doing a preemptive strike defensively against other states. That's what he says he's going to do, and we will cover that when his wars against the Helvetii. We will cover that in later episodes as well. We might not even stay with the campaign as it is. Okay, we might use the game to show you different things like Caesar in Gaul, things like that. We might, use them as one-offs to do different lessons. So we might not take you through the entire campaign, but we'll see. But again, those are the three modes of thought with Roman expansionism, and I thought I'd do that whilst I had this the screen up here, which is diplomacy. So let's see who wants to trade with us.
Enter, friend, and speak. We surely have.
Greetings, my friend. You have my ear for your speech, and if it profits my people, agreement too.
Yeah, Athens are arseholes.
I think trade a bad idea. We do not want simple folk to be scared of the marketplace.
Arseholes.
Welcome, and the peace of Pharaoh, the favorite of Isis, be upon our meeting and in our words today.
Fuck you, Egypt. By the way, he sounds Egyptian, but he's actually Greek, which I quite like. Because that's what they were at this
I am
stage.
here to listen if you speak honestly. Truth will be your sharpest weapon. Excellent. We accept, and I give thanks to Athena for granting us all wisdom.
Ligurians, we don't want to trade with them. We don't want to trade with them either, because we're about to take them on in war.
Well met, friend. Sit, and let your words move me to anger or agreement, as you wish of them. I consent.
Oh God, I hate your voice. Go away. Jesus. What the fuck? I'm actually thinking we might end this episode by finishing off the
It is an honor to serve Rome.
the Latin states. That might be a good way to finish it.
For honor.
So I think that's what I'm going to do.
Your orders. Steady as we go. For honor and glory.
That's our full army. Good.
Your orders. Leaving the ship.
Oh.
Turn about! Drop anchor!
How? How do they get to do that? I don't understand how they got to do that. They can't go that far. That's actually not what happens in the game. Sorry, you can't go that far. I can't go that far. How has the ship's gone that far? It's ridiculous. Yeah, that does frustrate me about games like this. When, I mean, Total War games are famous for it as well. They're famous for
Yes.
potentially having license to cheat sometimes.
You men.
And they do it all of the fucking time. It really is annoying. Right, let's do it this way then. And they're really, like, there's no reason why they should be that far up in front of me as well. Like, you know, the balance of power there is so skewed in one direction. There's no reason. We're equal on footing in terms of numbers. I've made sure of it. So, there's absolutely no reason for them to be that far ahead. Our troops are actually better than theirs as well. Very frustrating.
All hands to the oars. Returning to land. Stopping for now. Fleet reporting. For honor and glory. The sea beckons. Ready for battle. It is a great and glorious thing to die for Rome.
Cool. Excellent stuff. So I think one of the final things that we'll talk about today is actually Roman adoption. That is something that I was going to do in this playthrough, but I didn't need to in the end. Roman adoption was an expediency term in Rome. Alright, now where is that army gone? Where is this army's just disappeared? It's probably gone into the woods, to be honest, but anyway. Yeah, Roman adoption was incredibly important because it gave... One thing it did do later on is it gave the emperors of Rome a means of carrying on their legacy without necessarily having to have children themselves. But in terms of Roman adoption as we know it, you know, our character was adopted into his family. You didn't have to be necessarily a family member by blood to be an inheritor of somebody's legacy. And in terms of the actual imperial system that comes later on with Augustus, Augustus was adopted by Caesar, who was his great uncle. He was a very distant relative, and Augustus himself adopted Tiberius, and then Tiberius adopted Germanicus, and Germanicus's son Caligula came to the imperial throne. And in that actual, you know, rundown of emperors, they were all adopted. They were all, you know, there was never one saying, "This is my son. He shall now be emperor after me." The only emperor, well, one of the only emperors to actually do that successfully, and I use that term loosely, was Marcus Aurelius with Commodus. Much later on, Marcus Aurelius actually, you know, made his son his heir, and Commodus then became emperor. And it's seen as the one black mark against Marcus Aurelius's character, in that he actually, you know, threw away the adoption system that was so prevalent and so successful before him, to actually bring in his own son, who then made a bit of a dog's dinner about governing the empire. But yeah, even before that, the Nerva Antonine dynasty, which is one of the more successful of the early dynasties, everybody in that dynasty was adopted. Absolutely everybody in that dynasty was adopted, including, you know, and I think it shows on the Roman system that a greater importance was placed on ability than blood. And I think that's a good thing, but I don't think it actually made sense all of the time. You know, there were some people who came to the throne who were completely unprepared. And if the system of government allows you to become emperor so easily, then that is only going to breed corruption. That is only going to breed discontent. And in fact, it did with the Year of the Four Emperors and the crisis in the 3rd century. That comes much later after this as well. So, Roman adoption is incredibly important for our playthrough because our character is adopted into his family. And in terms of the Roman state itself, I think it sort of acts as a salve for the ruling class. You know, no longer do you have to produce sons; you can adopt one. You know, if you see someone who has great ability, like if your nephew has a great ability with commanding men and is actually a really good orator and a very well-educated person, you can adopt him to be your son and, you know, have your land. It gives a more flexible method of rule to the Roman state rather than actually having your heir is the only person who actually take on any of your things. There we go.
Yes.
Hopefully that army will get attacked because I think we can. I think we can actually stand up to the heat on land.
The waves still beckon.
What is going on here? Some fool has been caught defacing the temple of Jupiter. Such matters should not be taken lightly. Chastising myself.
The spirits have noticed that our trade.
No. There will be no non-aggression pact with you because we're going to murder you. So.
At your command.
One last thing I want to do before we do the finale of this episode is patrons. Patrons were an intrinsic part of Roman society. We didn't get to do it in this episode, but we will in later episodes. What we just saw there before of me doing that judgment of the person doing the temple of facing the temple of Jupiter, that might not be a member of our family. That might be one of our clients. Now, in Roman terms, in the Roman city and in Roman provinces as well, there was a client-patron system of government at ground level, which basically means if you're a man living in one of the Roman districts and you want money to be able to, for instance, buy a few slaves or buy some land or start a business, you will approach a local client, a local patron. You will approach the local patron. He will receive you in his normally in Roman. One of the diagram A that you have on your handout. Normal Roman stately homes or homes of people who had money had a reception area where the man of the house would go and sit in the morning and would receive clients. And these clients would come and they would ask for money for, again, things like, house improvements or a bit of land or some irrigation tools or slaves or goods, things like that. Essentially acting like a modern-day bank when you go in and you ask for a business loan or something like that. Now, the difference is that back then, the patron would also have a patron. He would be the client to someone else further up the ladder. And that person would invariably have the ear of a senator of Rome, or would even be a senator of Rome, who needs people to vote in a certain way. So he will say to his clients, we're voting this way. And then that client will say to his client, we're voting this way, and everyone will vote in that same direction. So that's a very loose translation of the dichotomy of power in the Roman Republic and Empire later on as well. In that, obviously, that's the relationship of power. That's the dialogue of power between the people on the bottom and the people on the top. It's all in favors for favors. And actually, when you look into the Italian state of mind. And let's bring this all the way forward to Sicilian families in New York. Okay? Back then, it was a client-patron. You know what I mean? And this is only 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. You're looking at that back then it was a client-patron system as well, where you would go to your local strongman and you'd say, you know, I need money to do this, and they would give you some money that you then you either need to pay back or you need to owe them a certain favour. You know, that was one thing in Mario Pucci's in The Godfather, which rings true. I've seen quite a few documentaries where that rings true, where they say yes, you know, that was exactly the system. You know, you would get money, or you would have a favour done for you by the mob, who would then turn around and, you know, you'd say, well, you now owe us a service, or you owe us some money. I'm not saying that's what Italian people are like, before anyone gets on me, but what I'm saying is it's very, very funny how those two systems are very similar. Because, you know, the mob way of looking at things is very primitive. I use primitive in inverted commas, of course, because the Romans were for their time, were a very, very sophisticated society, and that shows the fact that that way over 2,000 years later, you know, people are still using their method of government to construct deals between people, patrons and clients. So yeah. That's exactly what we just did there. We were a patron, and one of our clients misbehaved, so it was up to us to discipline them. So let's go and
Besieging the settlement.
take out these guys. Now, I think we should be able to do this. I'm going to encircle, just in case they try and well, a few more. Now, I'm hoping they will try and break out and attack us. That's what I'm hoping for, anyway. Because we don't really want to be fighting in a city against bigger numbers, but we'd love to draw them out. Because on the field, Romans are a frightening prospect indeed, which we will cover in later sessions. Yep, we did. We drew them out. That's good. Quick save it here in case I fuck it up. Now let's fight this on the battlefield. This is what I love this game for. I won't be going too much into Roman military tactics in this video, but I will be going into it in the next video where we take on the Gauls. I'm really hoping this army deploys in front of us. That'd be really sweet. Then we can knock this army out, and then all of a sudden, the other army's in real trouble. But the computer says we're not supposed to be winning this at all. No, we're supposed to be losing this. So we'll see. Okay, so all of our army is deployed. I don't think we need to make too much of a... No. So as you can see, if you've not played this game before, we literally recruited all of these troops during the episode. And you can actually see them all now. All here ready to go. These all Hastati, all wearing the normal armour of the Hastati back in the day. And you know what, I'm actually going to lock them together in a group.
Enemy reinforcements approaching.
We must make them proud that we are their defenders.
Right. So that army has come up here. We need to run up here and deal with these pretty quick. Or we can get the high ground, which they're leaving behind, and wait for them to come to us. Because they need to defeat us within an hour to win the battle. So I'm thinking we might actually. Yeah, we'll take the high ground then. Sod it. They want to. What they want to do is link up with their troops who are coming in, so they have more numbers. What we want to do is take the high ground.
Forward!
Aha! Or now the computer's seeing what I'm trying to do. It's now coming straight for me, which I wanted. That's what I wanted. They either wanted to take the high ground from them, or make this force come at me, essentially. Because then we can destroy this piecemeal, hopefully. And, yeah, we can do some damage. Oh, shit.
General!
Didn't realise they were up there. Well, that might be bad. That might be really bad. Okay. So about to see a stand-up fight. Yeah. So we're winning decisively.
General!
Across the line, which is good. These guys are actually holding out, which is great.
General! Glory awaits! Missile infantry! Now! General!
Okay, this unit's broken, which is good.
At the double! Advance!
Attack these from the rear. I'm actually going to try and get my general through. Oh no, I'm not. Oh, he's got cavalry there. Screw that then.
Hastati! Rob forward!
I'm not leaving those men
Melee
behind.
troops awaiting orders. Commander, at your service.
They're trying to pull back. Yeah, they are. They're trying to pull back. We need to press. We need to press very, very quick.
general is under attack.
Yeah, he's alright.
Melee infantry!
If we can kill their general, though, that'd be good.
General! Riders at the double!
Who is that? If that is my own
The
men
enemy general
firing into my
is
fucking
dead.
general. Good. I thought my own men were firing into the general then. What are you doing?
One of our units has used all its ammunition.
These guys.
Infantry! Jupiter gives us strength!
Over there.
Send them streaming to the afterlife! Has started!
One of our units has used all its ammunition.
For glory! General! Advance! Has started! Men advance!
We should have it from here, really.
Orders! Engage! Orders! Engage! Ready for orders! General!
Death take us all! Get!
Cool.
Attack!
Bam.
Attack to die!
Play in slow-mo. Hehe.
The enemy general is dead.
Another enemy general is dead. It's taking you inside the battle now in slow-mo. So I thought this would be like a feast for the eyes before I start slowing it down and going into tactics and stuff next time. Oh, just stabbed him right in the fucking... There we go. Right in the gut there. What's going to happen here? He's brave, look at him, he's having to go at everyone. He's not... Nope. Nope, there we go.
Romans ready for duty!
One of our units has used all its ammunition.
Remember... Yeah, slay them all. Whoa! We went over. Arse over tit there. There we go, that should be it. Should all be routing, yep, they're all routing from the field. Continue the slaughter.
One of our units has used all its ammunition.
See, the computer will look at numbers and say, well, you should be losing that, but when you look at the quality of the Roman troops, and this is exactly why they won so much of their early conflicts as well, but we'll get into that next time. Next time we will be doing a lot more military and a lot less cultural, which is good for me because I like military history. That's my favourite. It's my favourite. We're just trying to kill as many of them as we can so they're not going to get back to the city. Unfortunately, we've only got one cavalry unit to chase down. Yeah, we may as well defend it there. So we took 961 losses, and they took around 3,000 losses. So they, yeah. And they had 1,000 more men as well. That isn't too bad.
Waiting for orders.
Will you not kill?
No, I'm not going to give you any gold for non-aggression pact. Alright, let's get to the end of this session. Ooh, we'll talk about that next time as well. Really played it. That's pretty cool. That's going to be it for this session. So thank you very much for watching. And next session we'll be going over Caesar. And we'll be going over Roman warfare. Especially early Roman warfare against the Gauls and things like that. We'll be going over more of the customs of the Gauls. And yeah, we're generally going to have some more fun. So that was it for this episode on the early Republic. Thank you very much for watching. And also, you know, if you're interested in more tutoring, of course, this one was free. And this one was a brief overview of Roman imperial systems and things like that. I do more in-depth courses on sites like Tutorful. The link's in the description below. And yeah, I do private tutoring as well. Very, very, very reasonable rates to get you ready for university or ready for any exams or anything that you have. So yeah, all the links to those are also in the description below. We will be doing more free classes as well, but of course the free classes are nowhere near as in depth. It's generally me having fun with this game that I really love, and talking about Roman history, giving you a taster of Roman history. So that's all it's intended to do, is to whet your appetite a little bit. But if you want some more, or if you want one-to-one tuition, I'm also there as well. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll speak to you guys next time.